Alex, great to be here. Thank you for
No,
having me.
no, fantastic. And I'm glad I got over the name and got it correct. We always like to start on the right foot with the show here. I'm going to take you back to your last year in school, just to let our audience get a sense of where you were and where you've come from and what influenced your life.
Well, I went to a very conservative girls' school. And in my last year, I loved books from the age of 3. I devoured books all my life. And I was best at English literature. That was my best subject. So when I was in my last year, I wanted to be a journalist and I wanted to be a writer. And that was really the trajectory I thought my life would go. It didn't go that way. Well, it came back around to that later on, but that was really my passion when I was 18.
And where did you find that love for reading? What sort of drove that passion within you?
Well, I was apparently crawling up bookshelves when I was 3, my mum told me. I did grow up in a very conservative British stiff upper lip family.
Right.
Where we didn't really do feelings. And I was a very emotional child. I was very emotionally volatile and I was called an emotional fruitcake and was apparently difficult child. I was that tantrum throwing kid in the supermarket that you had to look away. That was me. And then what I discovered was when I read books, I discovered there was a world beyond my own. And that there were people I could relate to that I couldn't relate to so close to home. And then I read To Kill a Mockingbird when I was 10 years old, which blew my mind. And after that, all I wanted to do was write books and read. And in a way, I lost myself in books, but I also found myself in books.
I think that's fascinating. I mean, to take a book like To Kill a Mockingbird, I think a lot of people haven't read it, but to pick it up at age 10 and sort of be influenced by it, I think is some feat.
Yeah, I just, my daughter doesn't, no interest in books. She's 10 now. It's really interesting. But when I was her age, that's all I wanted to do was read.
Oh, fantastic. And what a world of escapism you found.
Hmm.
So what were you going to do? You were leaving school. If I understand it, you decided to do a bit of traveling first before you went to university.
I did. I knew that I was very closeted in my little girls' school. So before I wanted to go to university or college, but I decided to get a job. Bizarrely, there was a whole series of things that led to this. I met someone who lived in New Orleans,
right,
and I got a job in New Orleans as a waitress in a hotel. And I went straight from my little conservative school to one of the craziest, most glorious, colorful, vibrant, diverse cities in America. And I spent a year there. I was incredibly shy and nervous. And I used to go home, I go to work and go to my apartment every day. And then this amazing Iranian woman who worked in the hotel scooped me under her wings. Right. And taught me a lot about life.
That sounds like a whole new other interview.
Yeah, it was quite a wild time in my life. It's a very wild city, and I was there for Mardi Gras, and it was just again, it blew my narrow little mind for the second time.
Well, I think it's fantastic because people underestimate the power of a mentor. So you found your first mentor, as we might call them.
Yeah, she was 10 years older than me, and she'd fled Iran during the revolution in 1979 because she wanted to be a liberated woman.
Right.
And yeah, she became an incredibly good friend who taught me a lot about how to express myself and how to find a confidence that I'd never really had.
That's fantastic. So a year there, you were going to come back then. So certainly a changed woman.
I was. And then I went to university to study English literature and psychology. And again, that was a major change for me because it was a very you know, all the students carried around the Socialist Worker newspaper.
You're right.
And you remember that? And I don't even know if that's still around. And I was from this very conservative school. And I had a really quite posh accent. And I was, you know, quite seriously teased and bullied the first term. But it was what I wanted to be in. And I finally persuaded them, I actually want to be in this, and I want to learn from you, and I want to hugely diversify the context that I move in. And after a term, they got that, and it all relaxed. And I still have friends for life from that place.
So did they teach you English what's proper?
No, not at all. It was very kind of feminist, anti, you know, George Orwell. You know, he went to Eton, so let's all hate him. I mean, it was it was like that. It was like that. But I loved it. I mean, I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. I felt completely liberated by being in that world. And in many ways, it started a lot of trajectories in my life that I would not have, paths I wouldn't have gone down. I was, and originally I was accepted, I was given an offer at Cambridge University.
Right.
But I didn't get good enough A-level results.
Sure.
And now I feel so grateful that that happened, because
Right.
I think my whole life would have been very different if I'd gone to Cambridge.
And I think what you've demonstrated here is the power within everybody to embrace excitement in life. Go and search it out and experience it.
Break out of your comfort zones.
Yes, yes.
Break out.
Because you never regret it. I know people hate change and people are resistant to change, but there's great liberating feelings once you embrace it.
You can't evolve without it. There's no evolution without change and without even major challenges and crises in your life. So comfort and growth are impossible bedfellows in my experience.
Wise words. So the course you were doing in English and psychology, that's about a 3-year course.
Yeah.
So where to next for you in your career?
Then I went to the BBC, because of course I still wanted to be a writer and a journalist, and I got this incredible job. I can't believe I got this as my first job, but my first job was writing the blurbs on the back of, back in the day, VHS videos and audio cassettes. So I wrote the blurbs on the back of 101 Great Goals, Blackadder, The Goon Show, Hancock's Half Hour. I just listened to radio shows and watched TV all day and wrote the blurbs on the back of the packages. It was heaven.
It sounds fantastic. And you actually got paid.
Best job I ever had.
I think that's a fantastic job. I wonder where I'd sign up for that one. Yeah, fantastic.
It was a fantastic job.
And I mean, they were diverse from Hancock's Half Hour to 101 Goals. It certainly tests your creativity.
It did, because I had to cover every program that was released and every radio show that was released. But I mean, what a great job to start out with.
Oh, fantastic. But you had a more of an interest moving towards the psychology side of it.
I did. I mean, this was a time in my life where, I graduated with a first-class degree and deep insecurities and lack of confidence. And so I presented myself to be very confident in the world, but internally I was deeply shy. So I became very interested in psychology, which I'd also studied at university. So I became very interested in the human condition, emotional intelligence, all these things. And so I was doing that in parallel to my BBC job. And in the end, I fell in love with it more than I had fallen in love with books. And I moved from the BBC to a business consultancy that did mindset change and culture change in organizations. And back then it was a very odd thing to do. Not many people were doing that. But I worked with a wonderful man called Roy Langmaid, who taught me a lot. And I spent a few years learning from him about how to take psychological work into the business world to help them improve their culture, their performance, their results, etc.
Was there anything in particular you remember back in those days that you kind of went, wow, that's amazing?
I can tell you a story that's quite,
Yes, yeah, perfect.
it might raise your eyebrows,
Great.
but it might raise an eyebrow too, but it was very impactful for me. So we work with the company Tam Brands, who make female hygiene products.
Okay.
And it was ran by men. The company was all ran by men, and who related to menstruation as a kind of mechanical thing that happened. It was like a mechanical situation that you had to kind of have a mechanical solution to. And so what we did with them was we first trained the leadership in how to listen deeply to women in ways they'd never listened to them before, beyond to our focus groups. And we spent 3 days with them shifting their own mindset about this entire topic. Wow. Because it's such an uncomfortable topic. And even though they led this business, it was still an excruciatingly uncomfortable topic. And then we put them in a room with 100 women for 2 whole days. And we had the women tell detailed stories of their experiences with menstruation, which I won't share right now.
Thank you very much.
But it completely blew these leaders' minds.
I'd say it did.
It blew their minds. I mean, at times their jaws were literally dropped onto their desks because they could not believe what they were hearing from these women about what their true experiences were like. And as a result of it, they went back and changed the entire culture, marketing, the whole way they approached the product. So that was my most memorable experience from working in that company.
You could nearly have a program on that alone. I'm just fascinated. And we see it so often in business that people are running organizations actually don't understand their customers.
No, it's true. And also a lot of customer research and market research is very limited to, questionnaires or little 2-hour focus groups. It's a very limited inquiry. One of the things from that I've learned to do is put my clients into a much deeper inquiry with their customers, so that I think their customers have stated needs.
Yes.
But actually what you need to get to are the invisible, unconscious needs. And when you can market to the things they don't tell you about, the needs they have that are more hidden, then you can really excel in customer service. But that's not, that's a skill to learn. And you need to be in a much more authentic relationship with your customers than a lot of the methodologies allow.
It's quite interesting, because what you're identifying here is the real reason that people may buy your products or services, but for some strange reason won't be upfront in identifying it.
Or even necessarily aware of what they really, really want. And that comes through inquiry and listening and knowing the right questions to ask. So I think there are stated needs, visible needs, and invisible needs. And when we can get to the invisible needs, then we are onto something that our competitors often miss.
If I was to ask you this and put you on, you weren't expecting this question. What's the most powerful question you think you can ask anybody in trying to discover what their real issues are?
I don't know if I have one question, because it is about relationship building.
Sure.
And the more they trust you, the more they open up. So I think the heart of it is building trust and creating a safe space. But it's always in the territory of what they're afraid of.
Right.
Of what they're afraid of, and maybe even don't know that they're afraid of.
So it's more the pain side rather than the gain side.
Almost always there's a pain side that when you get to it, you're into a whole new relationship with your customers.
Right.
But that pain side isn't easy to access necessarily. Not always, but mostly.
And I suppose in the hustle bustle of the modern world and this sort of need for instant gratification, people are not spending enough time going deep in with their own customers and clients to get the information, the real information they need.
I think it's lacking, and I think, you know, there's so much the need is for quick fix, quick fame, quick glory, 90-second, 30-second sound bites, skills. I can't watch a video for more than 3 minutes, etc., etc., etc. That is the world, though, that we need to operate in that world, and we need to be able to be of service in that world. But there are still ways you can deepen a relationship, even in a 3-minute video, if you know how to do that.
Yeah.
It's really a question of knowing how to do that. And that's a capability that I have, but it's a capability I also teach my clients.
While we speak of such things, shamelessly tell us where people can find out more about you, your website or maybe LinkedIn.
My website is simply sophiesabage.com. Bravo, bravo, rather than Victor, sophiesabage.com. And if you're interested in the thing I'm doing the most at the moment is I'm really helping people tap their creativity in crisis situations. And we're in the midst of dozens of crises right now, in case you haven't noticed. And a lot of crisis management is actually trying to control the uncontrollable.
Yes.
When actually we need to learn to surrender control rather than magnify control in these situations. So you can also go to lifework.studio/creativity in crisis and learn more about that particular subject.
That's fantastic. Okay, I'll certainly put out that link when I'm distributing the interview as well. Let's move you on. Okay, then. You have an influence, but you were to find a life mentor then fairly soon after that.
I did. When I was, I guess, 25 years old, I was very fortunate to meet someone I would call an unsung genius of the 20th century. His name was K. Bradford Brown, PhD. I called him Brad. We all knew him as Brad. He was a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, theologian. He'd been a direct student of Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, survived Auschwitz. He was a direct student of Alan Watts, who brought Eastern philosophy to the West. So I stand on the shoulders of some really big cheese giants in the world of psychology. And he became my mentor, and for really up until his death in 2007. And he created this incredibly powerful methodology because he wanted to make psychological wisdom accessible to the mentally well. In his day, to the mentally well, and accessible to anyone who wants to improve the quality of their life and the quality of their results. So I learned that methodology. It was a complete game changer for me personally. And then I trained to teach it. And after a couple of years with him, I said, let's take this into business. This is going to be so powerful in the business world. And he went, really? I'm not sure that they won't like it, he said. They won't like it. And I said, trust me, let's do this. So we went into business together and we ran a business, well, until his death in 2007. But I continued to run it after his death, called Interaction. And we went into very diverse organizations, retail, banks, education, and we did leadership work, culture change work, and customer service. Those were the three main things we worked on, but always helping our clients to shift their mindsets and to bring their creative powers to challenging, unexpected, even blindsiding situations. One of my clients was HBOS, for example. We were working in the retail side of the business when the commercial side announced the £10 billion loss.
Wow, yes.
So we helped the retail side. They really said customers were queuing to close their bank accounts.
Yeah.
And we worked with the retail team to minimize the bank account closures. Ultimately, Lloyd's took over. But those are the kind of situations we often work with our clients to go, how do we respond to this kind of a hit.
I'm sure there isn't sort of just one particular issue, but from your experience, what is stifling creativity in organizations when it comes to finding solutions?
That's such a good question. Well, I have a few answers to that.
Great.
Mostly fear, and mostly the need to stay in control. So if you want to stay in control, you can't be creative. Just you can't. And actually, crisis is, in my experience, the birthplace of creativity. People are often at their creative best when they're in a really challenging situation. That's been my experience personally and professionally.
Right.
And I think creativity is taught as a skill a lot of the time. There are creativity skills or innovation skills. My experience is we all have an inner well of creativity that we can unleash if we can just get out of the way.
Right.
So I don't teach creativity as a skill. I teach people to unblock what's blocking their creativity, which is often beliefs, old belief systems, mindsets, fear, anxiety. I need to look good. I need to stay in control. I don't want to take risks. All these kinds of things lock your creativity down. And I call it the one thing that can change everything, because if you can learn how to shift those kinds of beliefs and those kinds of limitations, everything changes. You can change systems, processes. In my experience, there's an orchard of possibilities, ripe plums waiting to be picked. If you just can see them, if you can just see past the anxieties and the need to control, and that I've got to prove myself and I've got to look good and all of that, there's just immense possibility available to us if we learn how to see it rather than learn creativity skills, if that makes sense.
No, it certainly does. So it's quite interesting, what you're saying about people unleashing their better selves, or being held back by themselves.
Yeah, it's really about get out the way and the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah.
But the human mind, and human anxieties and all that we're taught to believe in life really can really lock that down. And you can unplug it. And so I think what I do is help people and help my clients unplug that. And then they just get on with it after that.
It's interesting as a person, and we've talked for a short while just before this interview. You came from, as you identified, a very, very conservative sort of home. However, where will I go to unleash myself? It'll be to New Orleans.
I went straight to New Orleans, HJ.
Yeah. Let's not even go to London. Let's go even bigger. Bigger is better. And also, it brings me on to the next topic, which certainly over the last just over half dozen years, you faced a new and more serious challenge to yourself. And so how did you embrace all that you've learned through your psychology and unblocking to manage this situation?
Well, I found myself in a situation that really put it to me, like, really, you know how to do what you say you know how to do? So in October 2014, just over 6 years ago, I was given a terminal cancer diagnosis, and I was really given months to live at that point. It was blindsiding because I really felt quite well up till that moment in time. I had a sharp pain in my back and my sixth sense went, check it out. And I had to really push to even get an x-ray because it didn't seem like something was wrong with me. Turns out I was riddled with tumors.
Right.
And that really brought me to my knees. I needed to close my business at that point in time because I was incredibly ill. I nearly died. I did nearly die. However, one of the things that turned it around for me was, while they were figuring out how to treat my body, I knew I had to treat my mind.
Sure.
I knew I had to get out of my terror, or I was a goner. I just knew that. And interestingly, when they said you're going to die, I started dying within 24 hours. And I said to my husband, now that's in my head, I'm dying.
Right.
And thank goodness I had the tools to work through my own fear, to work through my terror, and to find some power in the situation, whereby I eventually took the reins. I became an expert in my own disease. I said no to some treatments that I was being pressured to have. My medical team have been extraordinary, by the way. And I unleashed my creativity like never before to save my own life. And I'm still here 6 years later. And I also went back to my writing calling. So I've written 3 books in the last year. And I have changed the cancer world in some ways. I've become a very high profile patient activist in the cancer world. And I've become a speaker and various other things. So I've been coming back around after all of that. It's been incredibly, most creative few years of my life by far. But I'm coming back around to the business world now with all that I've learned in the last few years has magnified what I did before. And I've learned new things I didn't know before. So in many ways, it's been brutal, but it's also been the most wondrous. You know, it's been awful and full of awe at the same time. And here I still am speaking to you today.
Fantastic. Tell us about the books.
My first book was called The Cancer Whisperer.
Oh.
And the reason I wrote that book was because it was because there were several things that happened, but there was a moment when I was sitting in the oncology waiting room, and it was very interesting, stiff upper lip waiting room. So we were all there with cancer. No one was talking to each other. No one was connecting. No one was saying, are you as freaked out as me? Just eyes were to the ground, and fear was stalking the corridors of the hospital. It was like a fog in the
I can understand that. All right.
Feel it. And someone sent me a loving message, and I burst into tears. So I'm sitting in the waiting room crying, which I was fine with. I mean, it seemed entirely congruent to my situation. But this very anxious nurse came running over to me and spilt all her anxiety into my lap by saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Which really meant, can you stop crying? Can you stop crying? Stop crying. And I looked around the room and I said, you know what? I think I'm the only person here who is okay. Why is no one else crying? I mean, what's going on? I'm the only one here. And I realized in that moment that I had something in my hands that many patients didn't have, which was an emotional psychological toolkit that allowed me to have my cancer instead of my cancer having me. So I wrote The Cancer Whisperer to help patients navigate the psychological, emotional challenges of a diagnosis. Because if we don't take hold of our fear takes hold of us, and it makes all our choices and all our decisions, which can be devastating when fear is making your decisions about treatment. And it just went boom, Alec. I popped it on Amazon, and 36,000 copies were sold in 3 days. And
wow.
And then the Guardian Observer picked it up, and suddenly I was in the press with it, and I had an agent begging me, saying, please, can I be your agent? And then it got picked up by Hodder and Stoughton, who've been my publisher ever since. So it was quite a very unexpected, I call it, sometimes we need to be brought to our knees to rise to our destinies. And I've had the privilege of supporting thousands and thousands of cancer patients in recent years to help them get through their fear and get their power back in the situation, which is essential when you're going to be creative. Get through your fear, take your power back, and then you can respond to what you're dealing with as best you can.
Wow.